안녕하세요. Outgrowing God, Richard Dawkins. 131. Before 1967, British men could go to prison for homosexual acts in private. Now, after decades of work against persistent prejudice, being gay has become normal, and gay people can claim the same respect as anyone else. It was parliamentary votes after a long hard struggle by the suffrage campaigners that gave women the vote in country after country during the course of the 20th century, and we may be sure members of parliament and congresses were influenced by letters they received from their constituencies and congressional districts. Decisions in courts by judges and juries also serve to move the climate of opinion along as the decades go by, and we mustn't forget academic books and lectures in universities. Scholars who make a study of moral values, of right and wrong, moral philosophers, have an influence on the change in the air. I will say a bit about moral philosophy here to round off this chapter. There are various schools of moral philosophy. I shall talk about only two of them, absolutists and consequentialists. They take very different views of how to make moral judgments. Absolutists think some things just are right and some things just are wrong. No argument. Rightness or wrongness is just a fact, just plain true. Like the statement in geometry that parallel lines never meet. An absolutist might say killing another human being is just plain wrong. Always is, always has been, always will be. An absolutist of that type might say abortion is murder because an embryo is a human being. Some absolutists would even apply that argument to a fertilized egg, a single cell. Consequentialists judge right and wrong differently. Will have guessed from the name that they care about the consequences of an action. For example, who suffers as a consequence of an abortion, or who suffers as a consequence of refusing an abortion. Let's imagine a conversation between a consequentialist, Connie, and an absolutist, Abby. It gives an idea of how moral philosophers think and argue. Philosophers from Plato through Hume to this day are fond of making up dialogues between imagined Uyghurs, and I am following their example. Notice as we go how quickly philosophers moved from reality to thought experiments. Abi, thou shalt not kill another human being. A fertilized egg is a human being. Therefore, abortion, even of a single fertilized egg cell, is murder. I've heard a woman friend say a woman has an absolute right to do what she wants with her own body. That includes the right to kill an embryo which is in her body. It's nobody else's business but hers. But the embryo is another human being. It has right too, even though it is inside her body. Connie, your woman friend's argument is an absolutist argument, like yours. She claims an absolute right to her own body and everything inside it. That's absolutism, although of different kind of absolutism from yours. And you and she come to opposite conclusions. But I'm a consequentialist. I ask who suffers. You can define a fertilized egg as a human being if you like, but it doesn't have a nerve system, so it can't suffer. It doesn't know it's been aborted, feels no fear or regret. A woman has a nervous system. She can suffer if she's made to have a baby that she doesn't want and can't afford to look after. You and your woman friend are both absolutists. She is a woman's rights absolutist. You are, I suspect, a religious absolutist. I agree with her conclusion, but for a different reason. Her reason is absolutist. Woman's absolute right to control what happens in her own body. My reason is consequentialist. An embryo can suffer from a woman can, but a woman can. Abby, well, I agree that a single cell embryo cannot suffer, but it has the potential to become a fully fledged human being. That the abortion is depriving it of the opportunity. Wouldn't you call that a consequence? Perhaps I'm a kind of consequentialist too, more so than my woman friend anyway. Connie, yes, I agree that depriving the embryo of future life is a consequence, but since the cell doesn't know about it, it feels no pain or regret, why worry? Also, every time you refuse to have sex, you are potentially depriving a future human being of the opportunity for life. Had you thought of that, Abby? At first sight, that's not a bad point, but still, therefore, before the sperm meets the egg, there's no particular person there. By avoiding sex, you're not depriving an individual person of existence because there are millions of sperms and millions of potential individuals. Once the sperm is inside an egg, a particular individual person has begun. No other person before that moment there could be a million lives. So you can't say you are depriving any one person of existence. Connie, but if you talk about a fertilized egg as a particular individual person, you are implying an indi, indivisible entity. Do you know any identical twins? They start off as one fertilized egg. Then later they split and become two individuals. Next time you meet a pair of identical twins, why not ask them which one is the person, which one the zombie? Abby. Okay, I see what you mean. That's an alarming good point. Perhaps I'd better change the subject. If all you care about is who suffers as a consequence of your actions, what's wrong with cannibalism? I'm sure you wouldn't kill anybody to eat them, but how about eating somebody who's already dead and cannot suffer? Connie, his friends and relatives would hate it. That's a consequence, an important one. People's feelings matter, but only those with nervous system have feelings. A pregnant woman who desperately doesn't want another baby has feelings. The embryo inside her doesn't. Abby, sticking to my cannibalism example, suppose the dead person has no friends or relations. Nobody would suffer as a result of your eating him, Connie. Well, now we come to what we call the slippery slopes argument. You might feel safe at the top of a precipitous hill, but if the slope down the hill is slippery and you set one foot on it before you know what's happened, you find yourself sliding down to the bottom where you don't want to be. You are right that nobody would suffer if I eat an already dead person who has no friends or relations to care. That's the top of the slippery slope. But our society has a deep and well-established taboo against cannibalism. We are revolted by the very idea. If once we break through the taboo, we are in danger of sliding down the slippery slope. Who knows where it will end? The taboo against cannibalism is useful, like a safety railing at the top of dangerously steep slope. Abby, well, I can apply the slippery slope argument to abortion too. I agree that an early embryo can feel pain or fear or sorrow at being aborted, but there's a slippery slope all the way to the moment of birth and beyond. If you allow abortion, isn't there a risk of sliding down the slippery slope all the way past the moment of birth? Might not we end up murdering 1-year-old babies just because they are uh, nuisance, then 2 years olds, and so on? Connie, yes, I must say that sounds at first like a fair point, but the moment of birth is a pretty good barrier, a pretty good safety railing, one that we are accustomed to respecting, although it hasn't always been so. In ancient Greece, they would they would wait till a baby was born, take one look at it, and then decide if they wanted to keep it. If not, they'd leave it out on a cold hillside to die. I'm so glad we don't do that now. By the way, late abortions are very rare and only done for urgent reasons, usually to save the mother's life. The vast majority of abortions are early. And did you realize that many conceptions abort spontaneously without the woman even knowing she was pregnant? But actually, although I just used the slippery slope argument, I must admit that I prefer to do away with barriers and lines altogether. You absolutists want to draw a hard and fast line between human and non-human. Does an embryo become human at the moment of conception, when the sperm first joins the egg, or at the moment of birth, or at some point between, in which case precisely when? I prefer to ask a different question, not when does it become human, But when does it become capable of feeling pain and emotion? And there is no sudden moment when that happens, it's gradual. The argument, religious argument, many religious traditions entering the body at some definite moment. Roman Catholics think it's the moment of conception. The Catholic doctrine of the faith, entitled Donum Vitae, is very clear on the top point. From the time that the ovum is fertilized, a new life is begun, which is neither that one of the father nor of the mother. It is rather the life of a new human being with his own growth. I would never be made human if it were not human already. Right from fertilization is begun the adventure of a human life. It would, it would seem that whoever wrote that had never thought of the identical twin argument, the one Connie the consequentialist used. You probably guessed that my sympathies lie with Connie more than with Abby. I must admit, however, that consequentialist thought experiments sometimes lead these uncomfortable directions. Suppose a poor miner is trapped underground by a fall of rock. We could rescue him, but it would cost a lot of money. What else might we do with that money? We could save a lot more lives and reduce a lot more suffering by spending it on food for starving children around the world. Should not true consequentialist abandon the poor miner to his fate, never mind his weeping wife and children? Maybe. That maybe, but I wouldn't. I couldn't bear to leave him underground. Could you? But it's hard to justify the decision to rescue him on purely consequentialist grounds. Not impossible, but hard. Let's return to the main topic of this chapter. Do we need God in order to be good? I've spent quite a lot of time on moral philosophy, but moral philosophy is just one of the routes through which moral values change. Along with journalism, dinner table conversations, debates in parliamentary chambers, and student unions, legal judgments, and so on, moral philosophy contributes to the shifting something in the air which makes 21st century morality different from, say, 18th century morality, according to which slavery was a good thing. By the way, there seems no obvious reason for the trend to stop. What will 22nd century morality look like? Our modern morality, whether we are religious or not, is very different from biblical morality or chronic, chronic morality. Thank goodness, and the great spy camera in the sky is surely not a praiseworthy reason to be good. So perhaps we should all give up the idea that we need God in order to be good. Would that mean we should all give up believing in God? No, not for that reason alone. He might still exist even if we don't need him in order to be good. A God could be bad by our own moral standards, like the God character we met in chapter 4. And that still wouldn't mean he can't exist. Evidence is the only reason to believe in the existence of anything. Is there any evidence, any good evidence anywhere for any kind of God or gods? I presume you don't believe in almost all of the many gods listed in chapter 1, or in the hundreds more that I didn't mention. Chapters 2 and 3 might have convinced you that holy books like the Bible and the Quran don't provide any good reason to believe in any gods. Chapters 4, 5, and 6 might have led you away from believing that religion is necessary for us to be good, but you might still cling to believe in some kind of higher power, some sort of creative intelligence who made the world and the universe, and perhaps above all, made living creatures, including us. I clung to such a belief myself until I was about 15 because I was so deeply impressed by the beauty and complexity of living things, especially by the fact that living things look as though they must have been designed. I finally gave up on the very idea of any gods when I learned about evolution and the true explanation for why living things look designed. That explanation, Charles Darwin's explanation, is as beautiful and subtle as the living things that it explains, but it takes time to develop. It will occupy most of part 2 of this book, but even that is not long enough to do justice to such a big subject. I hope it may interest you enough to lead you to other books on evolution. Part 2, Evolution and Beyond. Chapter 7, Surely there must be a designer. Imagine a gazelle out on the Africa savannah, running for its life away from a sprinting cheetah, whimpering out what may well be its last breath. Perhaps, like me, you sympathize with the gazelle, but the cheetah has hungry cubs. If she can't catch prey, she and her cubs will starve, which might be a more unpleasant death than the gazelle's swift one. If you've been a film of a gazelle and a cheetah running, perhaps one of David Attenborough's documentaries, you probably noticed how beautifully, how elegantly designed both animals seem to be. Both of these muscular, taut-strung bodies have fast written all over them. The top speed of a cheetah is around 100 kilometers per hour. That's about 60 miles per hour. Some reports even put the top speed as high as 70 miles per hour, which is quite a feat when you have no wheels, only feet to propel you. And a cheetah can accelerate from 0 to 60 mph in 3 seconds, which is about what a Tesla in insane mode or a Ferrari can do. The cheetah can't keep it up for long. Cheetahs are sprinters, unlike wolves, who are long-distance runners, although their top speed is slower, more like 40 miles per hour. Wolves preserve and can eventually run their prey down, Cheetahs need to stalk their prey until they are really close enough for a final short sprint. Anything longer than a sprint exhausts them and they have to give up the chase. Gazelles can't run fast as cheetahs, again about 40 miles per hour, but they jig, dodge from side to side, which make it hard for a sprinting cheetah to catch them, especially because when you are sprinting at very high speed, it is hard to turn. Like other antelopes, gazelles also prone and being chased. Honking or taunting means leaping high into the air. This is surprising because it must slow their progress and consume energy. It might be a signal to the cheetah, don't bother to chase me, I'm strong. Fit gazelle who can leap high into the air. This probably also means I'm harder to catch than other gazelles. You'd be better off going for another member of my herd. The gazelle doesn't think these arguments out. Its nervous system is just programmed to punk without understanding why. Whether by punking or jinking, if a gazelle can evade capture for just long enough that the sprinting cheetah gets tired and has to stop, it's safe for another day. Both cheetahs and gazelles seem superbly designed. The spine of the cheetah bends way back and then thrusts, thrusts, thrusts the other way, almost bending double, powering the legs in a frenzied gallop. Its lungs are unusually large for an animal that size. So are the nostrils and air tubes because of the need to get lots of oxygen into the blood fast. The herd, too, is, is especially large to pump plenty of the oxygen-rich blood to the muscles, frantic with effort. But quite apart from the size of the herd, the fact of having a herd at all, having this complicated four-chambered pump working away constantly is remarkable enough. The mathematics of herd pumping has been cleverly worked out. I won't even try to explain it because it's too complicated for me to understand myself. How did all this complexity come about? Must it have been designed by a mathematically minded genius? The answer is an em- em- emphatic, if surprising, no, and we'll see why in the following chapters. Now think of the cheetah's eye, menacingly fixed on its prey, while it alternately crouches and cleaves stealthily forward, or the gazelle's eye, relentlessly scanning for lurking big cats. The vertebrate eye is a camera, a digital camera really, because instead of a film at the back, it has a retina with millions of tiny light-sensitive cells. We can call them photocells. Each photocell is connected via a series of nerve cells to the brain. There are several maps of the retina in the brain. By map, I mean a corresponding pattern, so that cells next to each other in the brain are connected to photocells next to each other in the retina in the same orderly fashion, both side to side and up and down on the map. The resemblance the resemblance to camera goes further. The pupil is or narrowed by special muscles attached to the iris, the colored part of the eye. You can see this if you look at your own eyes in a mirror. Hold the torch pointing at your left eye and then switch it on while looking at the right eye in the mirror. We see the pupil shrink in an automatic camera too. The iris diap- diaphragm, diaphragm, even the name comes from the eye, opens or closes just the right amount to let the right amount of light in. It shrinks the aperture when the sun comes out, expands it when the sun goes in, exactly like the iris in the eye. The pupil doesn't have to be round, like ours by the way. Gaussian pupils are horizontal slits. Cat pupils are vertical slits in bright light, widening to circles when light levels are low. What matters is that the pupil and the muscles surrounding it control how much light gets into the eye. Incidentally, the image on the retina is upside down. Can you see why that doesn't matter? Why it doesn't mean the world looks upside down to us? Again, like a camera, an eye contains a lens that can be focused on near objects and then refocused on distant objects, or of course anywhere in between. Cameras and fish eyes do it by moving the lens back and forth. The eyes of cheetahs, gazelles, humans, and other mammals do it in a less obvious way. They change the shape of the lens itself using special muscles attached to the lens. Chameleons, which have independently swiveling eyes on little conical turrets, can focus the two eyes independently using the fish camera method, not the lens squeezing method, and they judge the distance to a target, such as fly, by measuring what they have to do to focus on it. The fly then doesn't know what hit it. In fact, what hit it at great speed was the chameleon's tongue, which amazingly is longer than the chameleon itself, shooting out explosively like a sticky harpoon. The tongue harpoon is then reeled in, complete with the doomed insect stuck to the teeth. Chameleons and cheetahs have something in common. Both talk their prey slowly and stealthily until they are close enough. Close enough for what? In the cheetah's case, for a final explosive sprint. In the chameleon's case, there is a kind of final sprint too, but the sprint is by the tongue alone, while the body stays rock steady. You remember the cheetah accelerates from 0 to 60 mph in 3 seconds. The chameleon's tongue has the equivalent of 300 times that acceleration, but it hits or misses the fly long before it actually reaches 60 miles per hour. After all, the tongue is only slightly longer than the chameleon's whole body, so there isn't time to reach 60 mph, even at that phenomenal rate of acceleration. Once again, this all looks as though it demands a designer, doesn't it? Once again, it really doesn't. As we'll see in the next chapters, is exactly how the chameleon's tongue works has long been a bit of mystery. One early suggestion was that it was inflated by hydraulic pressure like an erecting penis, only much faster. The hydraulic method is also used by jumping spiders, lovable, lovable little creatures which live high into the air, having belayed themselves to the ground with a silk thread. Blood is pumped violently into the legs, which ab- abruptly straighten and shoot the spider upwards. Butterfly and moth tongues work like that too. They are coiled up at rest, then uncoiled by hydraulic pressure like a party horn. One of those toys you blow into and it shoots out into somebody's face, often making a blaring noise, although it's partly wrong. That hydraulic theory did get one thing right. The chameleon tongue is hollow, but instead of containing only fluid under pressure, it also contains a long, stiff, lubricated spike called the hyoid process. Obviously, the tongue is much longer than the hyoid spike, so the resting tongue has to be accommodated in folds around the spike, wrapped around, and round are strong muscles. This fact naturally suggested the next theory of how the tongue works again wrong, but closer to the truth. This was the theory that when the muscles contract around the hyoid spine, the rubricated hollow tongue is squeezed outwards from its telescopic folds, like when you squeeze an orange seed and it shoots off. That's almost what happens, but not quite. The thing is, no muscle can contract fast enough to deliver the insane acceleration of the chameleon tongue. For that sort of acceleration, the energy provided by the muscles needs to be stored ahead of time and then released later. That's how catapults work, and crossbows and longbows. Your arm muscles are capable of throwing an arrow very fast, but the bendy bow is. Your arm muscles slowly pull the bowstring back, and the muscular energy is stored in the bending now. Then the stored energy is suddenly released when your fingers let go, and the arrow shoots off much faster and more lethally than you could possibly throw it. The energy originally came from your muscles slowly pulling. The release of the energy is postponed and sudden, stored in the bow. In a catapult, the energy of your arm muscles is stored in the stretched elastic. How does stored energy power the chameleon's tongue? 감사합니다.